Hello everyone, welcome in. We have a very, very exciting video. Today we will be reacting to MDJ's video on YouTube that just premiered 3 hours ago. Now this woman is an obstetrician. She is a medical doctor. This is what I've been waiting for. This is what I've been hoping and praying for an expert to make some of the comments that she made in her video. I have a couple parts in my video queued up just to show where we talked about these issues when it came to the wrongful death lawsuit, as well as just medical facts in this case that, again, I am just a lowly paralegal. I'm not a medical expert. So as much as I can research and look into these things, I cannot tell you with 100% certainty about certain issues. Now, obviously, in this video, she may get certain things a little bit wrong or doesn't know all the facts, because who in the world other than literally possibly me and my closest followers on here know all the facts in this case? It's like the state, Gary's team, and us. We are the leading experts over here on the Alexee Trevizo case. So I can call it when I see it with some facts here and hopefully help her out if she did ever see this, because her opinion, her thought process, and her expertise on this topic is invaluable, in my opinion. So I am so appreciative that she did this. There is no way that anyone could know all the facts in this case unless you have painstakingly went through this. What I am very happy to report is by the end of this video, in the beginning of this video, she is speaking about the wrongful death lawsuit that is being brought, and she's obviously very upset by it, and she finds a lot of good fault in it medically wise, whereas I was focusing on, in my video about it, how they cannot, with these claims, rise to negligence, right? And we went through what encompasses a negligence claim. From her perspective, she's able to actually verify that what we were assuming is like that nothing rose to the level of negligence from the hospital. She can verify that for us, and she verifies it very confidently. And she has a lot of shade and upsetness at this lawsuit, obviously. And I don't mean to take joy in her pain against this lawsuit, but it is very nice to see an actual medical professional being enraged, I don't know, for lack of a better word, at this lawsuit, because it is enraging. It's ridiculous. This is my opinion, like I say, but it is enraging. So I have her video on 1.5. By the end of this video, I believe we have everything medically we need through the little tidbits of stuff that she says throughout this to piece together what actually happened. And even despite her disbelief about the placenta, which is obviously extremely understandable, because as someone getting right into the case, I don't, blame her for not being able to wrap her head around the, for lack of a better term, savagery of getting rid of that placenta. But it seems medically possible, despite how thick it is and full of veins and whatnot. I won't do a jump scare with a placenta for everyone. I was not very well versed in this stuff. I looked up the human anatomy page here on YouTube that has really great actual medical specimens, like real pieces of people's bodies that you see. And so I was able to see a placenta. It was crazy. It is crazy to think that you could rip it up. But in one of my videos, I even went so far as to, was that in a video or on Reddit? I don't remember. Sorry. I do so much on this stuff that I am starting to forget. At one point, I discussed somewhere, either in a video or on Reddit, the average flushability of toilets. Okay. This is crazy, but it is possible. What was it? I believe it's on average, a waste that people leave in the toilet when they go to the bathroom is like a 1/4 pound or something. And if you were to rip you could flush the placenta. It is possible, especially if it was one of those crazy high-powered toilets that are almost scary. That it's possible. So we can get into this now. I've listened to this once already, but it was just in my headphones, and I was getting the last of my work done for the day, and so I didn't listen extremely close to everything, but my ears perked up multiple times, especially towards the end when she starts talking about the morphine and everything else. Also, I have answers to some of her questions. Again, I will have to ask you guys to take my word for it or to look for the medical records yourself, because again, I have taken the stance of not posting the medical records on my page in any capacity other than when I needed to prove the print date for you guys. I did post the print date, but no medical information from those will be posted here. But since it has been leaked, I feel it is fair game to reference the information. But again, I will not be showing state's evidence on my, I will not be showing leaked state's evidence on my page. You could just, that's never going to happen. So with that being said, one of my biggest questions when I was going over the wrongful death suit was if the medication was a push medication or a drip medication from the research I was able to do. And obviously, I'm like a hypochondriac on Google trying to find this stuff out because I am not a medical professional and there's sometimes a lot of contradicting information. But from what I was able to ascertain is the morphine is a push medication, and you don't push it through quickly, you push it through slowly over the course of like 4 or 5 minutes. But she wasn't Alexee, after they knew she was pregnant, was not like constantly sitting there on a morphine drip. And I was assuming that because of the research, but I believe she also confirms that in here. And she says usually you're not just like dripping it or whatever. So we'll get through all of this. Let's check it out. Sorry for this long intro. Again, this is one of the best videos on Alexee that I have seen because of the perspective it's coming from and the honesty and the passion coming from this creator. Okay.
Now, instead of, taking responsibility for what has happened, whether they caused it or not, and instead of, doing the right thing and acknowledging that this was a horrible situation all around, I now get the pleasure of telling you that they will sue the hospital and the hospital staff for wrongful death. That's what they've decided to do. Okay, so we're going to read through their lawsuit. They have said that based on the hospital's negligence, the baby died. Okay, now my husband was like, well, I don't think this.
Sorry, hold on. I'll let her get into it. And sorry if it's a little too fast for everyone. And I have it on 1.5 speed, but I just love how she's like blown away by that negligence. Because remember, when we went through the wrongful death claim, we talked about how to get to a negligence claim, and there is no way that they really get past duty, and that's just assumed because it's a hospital and a doctor that they have a duty to treat Alexee and or the baby. But as far as everything else goes, it negates any other way to climb up that negligence claim ladder. I'm sorry. And so I'm so glad that she's flabbergasted by the negligence claim because it is flabbergasting in my opinion.
I don't think this will have much legs because I explained to him, what they were suing for, and I kind of like went through it with him. He's like, he gets to be my like sounding board to see if I should talk about things on stream and in a video, because I need to know how much the general public would be interested in hearing about it. And he's like, well, the way you've described it, it doesn't sound like it will have much legs. They'll just drop the case or whatever. And I was like,
wow, I wonder if he excuse me, sorry. I wonder if he's in the law at all, because that's the exact terminology I used in my video. This doesn't have legs, it's going nowhere. And if he's not in the law, to have been able to see that from the outside and not even understand, like, how they could possibly try and build a claim on this and just to completely disregard it, that's awesome, because it just goes to show how absurd this is too, that like she's saying, that is the general public interested in it? The general public thinks this is absurd and they think this is insulting. Okay, if I can speak on behalf of the general public. And I think it's a very bad PR move for Team Trevizo, in my opinion, because if you hadn't read the room after everything went viral, people were pretty mad at you, and this was like not the right step. They need a PR person.
Even in that situation, being named in a lawsuit as a medical doctor, as a hospital staff, a nurse, anybody, and they're probably all individually named in the lawsuit, takes up a huge amount of your physical time as well as your mental capacity. And these can drag on for years, particularly in the case of something like this, where it includes a wrongful death accusation. You have to spend time with lawyers. It's expensive. You are meeting with the hospital. You're meeting with the attorneys. You're getting deposed. This is an immensely time-consuming process that's also extremely stressful because you're at risk of losing, if they are successful in this, potentially your job, your license, maybe. Who knows what the result would be. And the fact that they've chosen
to hear that from a medical professional's perspective is great to hear because, again, I am biased. I come from the legal perspective. I already have an opinion on processes and if a claim is worth it or not. And I can only assume for the people when they're going through it how they feel, right? I can see how lawsuits affect people, but I can't put myself in their shoes, especially when they are in a profession that is not my own, and say like, oh man, how hard this, like I can only assume that. So to hear it from her and say like it really takes up all their time, their efforts, and these aren't people who work short shifts, these aren't 4 or 5 hour shifts that you go home after. This isn't your typical 9 to 5 where you know that you're getting to go home as soon as you get to clock out, you're not staying. These, what is the average medical staff, like a medical shift, like 12 hours or something like that, if not more, and they do that like days in a row and then get a few days off, I believe. So it's these people are working their butts off for us most of the time. Do I believe that there are bad people in the medical world? Duh, there's bad people everywhere. Look at the Trevizos, allegedly.
chosen to go this route despite such clear indications in that body cam footage that this could have been avoided if there was a better situation at home, just really pisses me off. So I'm going to pull up the actual filing, if you'll give me just a minute. Yeah, I Sumner think that there is absolutely no chance that they will win this. Quite honestly, I think they're trying to set up a defense, and I don't think they're going to be very successful in getting this actually.
Bingo. And to hear that from a medical professional, not someone in the law field, also makes me feel good. Like we said in the video covering this complaint she's about to go through, and the video about Dr. Vasquez's response to this complaint, which I'm super curious about her thoughts on the arbitration board and everything like that. I'd be curious to hear what she thinks about what Dr. Vasquez and everyone's having to go through with that. But hopefully the attorneys for the the defendants in this case are able to move for motion for summary judgment extremely quickly. That serves two purposes. One, they don't have to care about, which is it helps the state show that sorry, I don't mean to laugh when I say this, but it is just awesome. First, it goes to show the state can say they tried to sue the hospital and it got thrown out. Not just thrown out, but said the facts are so egregious in your case that we rule in favor of the defendants. Basically piss off, right? And that would be awesome to have in the criminal case. And so them trying to do this could technically backfire. It really could. And so, all we can have is hope in this, that there is a motion for summary judgment as soon as we're done with all the arbitration crap. And then the lawyers for Dr. Vasquez and the hospital and everyone else can do what they need to do and squash this like the bug that it is.
Proven, but there's no winning in this situation for the medical staff, because even if the charges get dropped, which they will, I think that they will, or the allegations get dismissed, that I just think it doesn't matter because the hospital staff is still having to put this time and energy into it. Okay, so I am spending way more time on this than I plan to, but that's okay. All right, so this is her arrest warrant. So she did end up getting arrested. And let's see. So this is just the story, and then I guess that's her arrest warrant. And the video footage of, we're so far into this. Gosh, why don't we just watch the footage from that too?
And this is what this case does to people.
I got real caught up in it, but let's watch this. I think this is another interesting insight into her mother's dynamic with her. Like, no, ma'am, you don't have a right to see the warrant. are either harboring a fugitive or you're not. Like, make your choice.
Make your choice.
Like, one, duh. What do you think she's under arrest for? And two, mind your business. Is she here or not? So irritating.
What is she under arrest for? For what? What do you mean that's all you're going to tell me?
And this is where we see that Rosa's already had some kind of contact with Gary Mitchell, because she calls Gary Mitchell rather quickly and is like, they're here.
I understand that, but I have a right to know as well. Okay, then let me know now. Let me know now. I'm giving you the question. I told you answer my question. What is she under arrest for?
She is so irritating to me. I'm so annoyed.
Oh man, isn't this just awesome vindication? Because that's how we've all thought. What I will say is that we can't keep saying that it was Rosa's overbearingness that made Alexee do this, because for the sake of the case, the motive specifically was keeping her life the way she wanted it, keeping Alexee's life happy and cheerleading and going to college-y and, sorry to sound so sarcastic, but that's the motive here. The motive isn't my mom was abusive and I was afraid of my. If the jury believes it was Rosa, they might take some of the blame off Alexee, because it doesn't matter how overbearing or crazy your mom was. Rosa was obviously not that overbearing in the fact that they literally laughed in the hospital waiting room when the detective implies that Devin's the dad. They don't care. Both of the moms are like, oh yeah, of course he is. And we don't know if Rosa knew that Alexee was on birth control or not, but typically if a mom is allowing her daughter to be on birth control, she kind of assumes or knows that her daughter is going to be having sex. So it seems weird that Alexee was so adamant that she was a virgin, because I'm going to assume if Rosa was always up Alexee's butt, like everyone seems to think she was so much and so overbearing, then she'd know she was on birth control at least, and then she would what happened with that, right? Why did Rosa laugh when it was implied that Alexee had sex? I think Alexee was not under pressure to not be a virgin. I think Alexee didn't want to deal with the ramifications of her actions. And I honestly think Rosa would have adjusted. That's my controversial view. I think if Alexee had had the baby and the baby was alive and she did the right thing after the baby came out, Rosa would have adjusted. I've seen parents way more pissed off come around. Okay. I've seen way crazier people come around to things that they didn't initially want. And so anyway, sorry, that's just my little rant, because a lot of people, when they're starting to see this case, they're like, this mom's crazy. Heck yeah, she's annoying, yeah, to say the least. These are all my opinions, but she seems a little intense. She's annoying. She has a rap sheet for seemingly being kind of like a boisterous, freaking out of bounds kind of person. But she didn't seem super pissed that her daughter had sex when the cops brought it up. They laughed. So when it comes to this specific aspect in this case, I'm like, I don't know if Rosa was as overbearing as everyone thinks she is. I think we see a very overbearing side of Rosa right now, because her daughter is being arrested and this mama bear aggressive woman is coming out, which almost understandably, she's still annoying as hell when she's doing it, but I can understand wanting to fight the cops, not physically, but argue with them and fight the fact that Alexee's being arrested. Sorry, I did not mean to say I can understand wanting to fight the cops. Please, no one ever fight the cops. I mean, I can understand why she's wants to argue them and protest her daughter's arrest. It's never a good idea, but it's understandable. It does not mean that she's like a crazy, overbearing, abusive mom. She took her daughter to the hospital. Alexee did everything else. Okay. So that's just my 2 cents on Rosa. I know I might get a lot of flack and a lot of hate for that. People hate Rosa. I think she's annoying. I don't think she's the main cause of Alexee's concealment of her pregnancy. I think it was that Alexee wanted to keep her life how it was, and she would have lost cheerleading. She probably would have lost Devin. She would have lost everything. Anyways, let's continue.
What is she under arrest for? No, I'm not bringing her out here yet. Let me know what she's under arrest
No, I'd rather harbor a fugitive.
for. For what? For what? For what? Tell me. Tampering with evidence at the hospital?
Yeah, hiding evidence would be considered tampering. I wish they would have arrested her for obstruction.
Yeah. It's okay, though.
I have a right to see a warrant.
Can't win them all.
Before the age of 18. This is my house. You have a right. You have to show me that warrant.
Your house is not under arrest, ma'am.
Well, they probably they have the right to enter her house and start going for it. One of the officers can show her the arrest for her house, or the warrant for her home, but not Alexee's. They don't have to show you the warrant for Alexee.
Oh my God.
Okay, good. She's skipping it forward.
Like, I'm not an expert in law, obviously, but I think the only person who has a right to see the warrant is a person who is being arrested. I would even imagine that showing a warrant for someone else's arrest who is not your person that you have guardianship over and who is not you would actually probably be more illegal than not showing someone demanding to see it, because, ma'am, it doesn't have anything to do with you. It's so bizarre that she is so sure she has a right. And it just makes me feel like maybe there was quite a bit of, like, in this family dynamic, this mother kind of feeling like she had ownership over the person that is her child. You know, I think that we see this a lot in parents thinking they have a right to decide things for their kids, and you do to some extent, but like it even comes down to the like having sex thing. Like, ma'am, you have a 19-year-old, and it's a very normal thing that at some point people become sexually active. And if that isn't what you know had decided would be the case for your kid, well, I'm sorry, but like they now are making their decisions for themselves, and like you can be disappointed in that, but it's like it's baffling to me to see people who think that they own their children. It's so unusual to me.
I feel like the parents who are very overbearing on their children cause more rebellious and sneaky children, rather than parents who allow kids to be open about their mistakes or doing typical teenage stuff that, yeah, your parents might not want you to do it, but maybe if you talk to your parents about it, there's an open door and communication's better, right? And so, because I had a very cool mom like that who was like, let's talk about stuff. Don't hide it from me. I'm not going to punish you severely. I'd rather know than freak out on you. Right. And she's like, you're in less danger if I know where you are, even if it's somewhere I don't want you to be. So, with that being said, I agree with what she's saying. I don't think that Rosa cared that much about her having sex. It's crazy. I know I was just going on that rant a little bit, but I don't think that Rosa cared all too much about the sex, and she laughs, about like, oh yeah, of course it's Devin, it's the dad. Alexee was on birth control at some point. She stops it and starts taking the phentermine, but I don't think sex was that big of a deal. I think the concealment of her pregnancy pissed Rosa off, and now Rosa is playing cover up for Alexee and playing, I gotta, literally Monopoly, get out of jail freaking card, like literally, because Rosa knows what she's doing right here, in my opinion, is dumb. She knows that it's just wasting time. But what mom wants to willingly hand over their kid to the police to be arrested? I can understand that. Yeah, she's, she does have a right to see the warrant for her house, but not Alexee's warrant. And so, no, that's just not how it goes. She's not really doing anything. She's obstructing, but she's not doing anything that I haven't seen other people do. I've obviously seen other mothers be way more cordial and forthcoming to the police with their children when they're being arrested. But I've also seen people freak out way worse than Rosa. So eventually she gives them to Alexee to them. But let's try and get to the wrongful death complaint here.
All right, so let's go through what this says. So wrongful death, personal representative of the estate of Alex Ray Fierro. That is, I guess, what they named the baby. The defendant is the hospital and the staff at the hospital. It's not immediately clear to me if they've named the staff defendant doctor. Would that be? Yeah, so they have named the doctor. I don't see a name in here, but I'm assuming that it would be included somewhere. I'm just looking at the chat for a second.
Just a little legal input here. in a lawsuit, you do not have to name everyone right off the bat. You can like count the number of people that were there or assumed to be there that you can remember were there or whatever. And they can be John or Jane Doe, A through however many. And so that allows you the ability to enter them in later without having to do any other supplemental work adding someone to the lawsuit. So, it just leaves you open to it. And so it does mean that they probably plan to, if they're able in the future, add each and every person they can.
First thing, yes. Okay. Find the actual part that we're interested in. Factual background. Okay. On January 26, 2023, Alexee Trevizo, hereinafter Alexee, the surviving mother of the decedent, attended Trevizo High School as a student, was on the cheer squad, and attended cheer practice on January 26. That evening at 11:47 p.m., Alexee was taken to the emergency room complaining of low back and abdominal pain. That's the first footage that we watched just a second ago. At the emergency department, the pain level that Alexee stated she was in was 10. Alexee is a female of childbearing age. Alexee had regular menses, had used birth control pills and condoms, worked out a minimum of 2 hours, 5 days per week, and had worked out on the 26th of January for 3 hours. At approximately 12:05 a.m., Alexee was seen in the emergency department, at which time the attending physician was Heather Marshall Vasquez. Okay, y'all, just send. I can't imagine just like being a doctor, doing my job. Like there are some times where getting sued for things that happen at your work is understandable, but this is just it so pisses me off. So yeah, they did actually name all the physicians, not just the hospital. So let's review that timeline. So 11:47, she shows up. She's being seen by 12:05. Okay, that is a freaking rapid response time for an emergency room.
That's
Upon
what I
exam,
said.
she said she had low back pain. The doctor said that she had been at cheerleading practice, or she told the doctor that she'd been at cheerleading practice, felt like she needed to have a bowel movement, but was unable to do so. Alexee denied pregnancy and informed the doctor that she was on her period. Alexee was asked if she had had a pelvic exam before and said that she had not. At 12:18, so she's now been in the hospital for 30 minutes and has been in the emergency room being seen for 13 minutes. They gave cyclobenzaprine and acetaminophen. That's Tylenol and I think Flexeril. I'll have to see if I think that's called Flexeril in the US, but let me check.
Here we go. This is why I'm so glad we have a doctor.
So that's a muscle relaxant.
Okay.
Tylenol, Flexeril, both things we use all the time in pregnancy.
Boom.
At 12:28, so 10 minutes later, she was given sodium chloride. This is just IV fluids. She was given ketorolac. This is Toradol, although we generally recommend against
A note on the sodium chloride. As far as, and you can double check the medical records for yourself, it appears the only thing that was continued after these original medications were administered were the IV bag, essentially with no medication in it, okay? It's just like salt water or whatever. And so just a note about that, because they don't continuously keep administering it. They're not just like pumping her full of morphine and ketorolac and all this other stuff. I'm just going to go back since I cut her off a little bit.
things we use all the time in pregnancy. At 12:28, so 10 minutes later, she was given sodium chloride. This is just IV fluids. She was given ketorolac. This is Toradol, although we generally recommend against using NSAIDs, non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs like ibuprofen, Motrin, etc. in pregnancy. And this Toradol is that. A single dose of Toradol, particularly during delivery, is not going to cause a problem. The problem with ibuprofen or anything like that is going to be long-term use. And although we still try to avoid it, there's nothing immediately toxic about this medication that would be a problem. Like if someone was accidentally given it while they were in labor, I would be like, it'll be fine. It's no big deal. Ondansetron, that is Zofran. We regularly use that all the time in pregnancy, particularly if you are nauseous during labor. And morphine, also used all the time in pregnancy. I mean, we try to avoid using opiates because they certainly can cause some problems like with respiratory depression. And that might be where I see, this come into play in this lawsuit. But that's the only one that I can even say maybe had a tiny bit of.
Now, remember what we've been saying here. It is always going to be the argument in either one of these lawsuits, in the criminal case, it is going to be, was it the morphine or was it the bag? Which one killed the baby? Which one killed baby Alex? Was it the morphine causing the respiratory issues or was it the bag? Now, in the criminal case, they have to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that the morphine killed baby Alex more than the bag. I hate to have to, I don't have a very good comparison, but it's kind of like rock, paper, scissors, in my opinion, where paper beats rock, bag beats morphine, okay? the morphine is going to be testified that it was a very insignificant amount. She doesn't, I believe, have the medical records because, again, she's just getting into this case. Finding where those were leaked and everything is a little bit deeper in this case. And so you have to go into TikTok and be finding the person who leaked it. And it's not viral news, the medical records didn't go viral. And so, with that being said, she does not know technically exactly how much morphine was administered. It has been said in different interviews on for TV, Long Crime, and all that with attorneys and people commenting on this case that it is a minuscule amount that should it have caused any kind of breathing issues, the bag would have obviously outweighed that. It would have the baby, even with maybe breathing issues, let's say it had some respiratory depression or whatever it's called after being born, but was never put in a bag. Just let's say the baby was if Alexee was in some kind of crazed state and wasn't being intentful with her actions to place the baby in the bag and clean up the crime scene, in my opinion, and say she was in some kind of mental distress and she just left the baby on the ground, right? And not even acknowledging its presence, it maybe could have lived if it wasn't in the bag, even if it had the morphine at that minuscule amount, right? So that's basically that issue here. And like I've said before, it's always going to come down to the bag versus the morphine. It will be a very sad day if the jury does believe that the morphine killed the baby. I believe the person tasked with that is not good at their job, in my opinion. So we don't have to worry, hopefully, too much. But yeah, she's basically finding the one issue in this, the glaring issue, that since she's a medical professional, she can see that that is the one main issue in this case.
Concern here, right? But they adamantly said that there was no way that she was pregnant. Okay, so morphine is not going to be immediately toxic to a developing baby, like a single dose of morphine at some point. Let me finish. We'll go through this and then I'll talk a little bit more about the morphine. Okay. All right. So a saline lab in your analysis was completed. No specimen was received of HCG qualitative serum. So this 22 is saying they put an IV in and then they saline locked it so that if they needed to give medications or draw blood through it, they could. They did a urinalysis to look if she had a UTI or something, but that they didn't send a blood specimen for a pregnancy test, which I don't think there's any reason that they needed to do that. They can do a urine pregnancy test and they already had a urine sample. At 12:28, lab tests were ordered and entered. At 12:28, a serum pregnancy test was ordered. It was then collected at 12:30, reported out at 12:51 by the call out showing a positive result. Okay, so I don't know if they ordered a urine pregnancy test or not. Either one would be fine. So they knew, but within an hour of her arriving, that she was pregnant, despite the fact that she adamantly denied any chances of that. The medications which were being given via IV, cyclobenzaprine, acetaminophen, sodium chloride, ketorolac, ondansetron, and morphine, and despite AGH, I don't know what AGH is. Did anyone catch what AGH is supposed to mean?
It's the hospital. It's
Doctor and nurses, knowing at 12:51 Alexee was pregnant, continued after they had notice of the pregnancy. Okay, cyclobenzaprine, acetaminophen, sodium chloride, which is literally just normal saline. Why they included that is so bizarre. Toradol, ondansetron, morphine. All of these, particularly if she was 15 weeks or something, are a couple of doses are not going to cause a problem. There's no reason it would emergently needed to have been stopped. Medication, including morphine, was not stopped after the defendants knew at 51 hours that she was pregnant. Okay, first off, I think that's a typo, but you're not just continuously running any of these medications except the normal saline. So this screams, I have no idea what I'm talking about. Normal saline would be an ongoing IV drug, potentially. It can also be given not like that. But none of the other ones are being given continuously over this time frame. I can't remember what time she delivered in that footage, but I would be surprised if they gave another dose of any of them prior to that.
Boom. Okay, you guys, this is where I got extremely excited. I'm going to try and find the exact spot where I said this, which I believe is right here. Let me share. Okay, so I got very excited when I heard her say this because I believe it is right here that I spoke about this before. Negligence, in my opinion. Here's where I get to a point where we're actually going to need more information. They, according to the medical records, all the medications were administered at, like they said in this complaint, around 12:28-ish, right, from 12:15 to 12:28. The pregnancy test doesn't come back till 12:51. We don't know if these were a slow drip medication, meaning they were all in the IV and slow. only being administered to Alexee, or if these were push medications, all pushed in through the IV and directly administered within a few minutes, like of being pushed through. Sometimes morphine can take up to 4 to 5 minutes to push through for safety reasons, so that you don't concave their chest or whatever they say. So they push it through, and oftentimes you don't just sit on a slow drip of these medications. They're giving them to you right away, and they're giving you the full dose, and they push it through the IV. They say here that it was continued, it was not stopped. Well, actually, the only thing on the medical records that they show that Alexee was ever put back on after having given birth and being removed from the IV, and once the doctor made contact with her and was trying to figure out what was going on, was a saline lock. So they actually didn't administer more drugs. And if it can be proven that these were all push medications, there would be no going back from having given them to her, and they weren't continued, and they weren't not stopped, as they say. We don't know if they were all pushed or if they were slow drip, but if they were pushed, there's really no issue as far as continuing them. They acted off the information they had and tried to relieve the pain of someone who, at that moment, indicated there was no possibility of pregnancy. Okay, so as you hear there, we have discussed this. I felt like that was a very important issue because, in my opinion, that is a complete lie in this wrongful death complaint. That is just an all-out lie, because they never continued to give her medicine. They didn't go back in and give her medicine once they found out she was pregnant. They did not do that. No more medications were given. Only her saline lock. That is it. And so it is not. I mean, if anything, that helped her to be getting rehydrated after, or right before giving birth, being on a saline. Like, if anything, that's a positive thing and not a negative thing. And so I'm so glad that she clarifies this here, because now we have an actual medical professional, not just me trying to look this up and figure it out, confirming that these medications are given in a dose. They aren't slowly dripped through a saline lock. Okay, so that is just awesome. Let's go back to what she's saying.
Prior to that, because you would dose morphine maybe every hour. This is just bizarre to me.
Boom.
All right, so the other windows there. Ketorolac, ondansetron, cyclobenzaprine, another typo. Come on, this is bad. And morphine all have warnings regarding use if a patient is pregnant. I'm not going to bother all of you by looking those up. Ketorolac, you don't want to use it continuously in pregnancy, but there are times when I would use it. If somebody has a degenerating fibroid, I might use it. There is, like, you're not going to cause harm to a fetus with a single dose of Ketorolac. Ondansetron is regularly used all the time in pregnancy. There are some concerns with cleft palate if given very early in the pregnancy, but even that data is really, it's questionable, so that's silly. Cyclobenzaprine, regularly used in pregnancy, and morphine, regularly used in pregnancy for people who are having acute pain problems, and even sometimes in the process of labor. Yeah, having warnings while you're pregnant doesn't mean, like, is going to immediately cause death to a baby. That's bizarre.
Another great point, which I'm not going to bring it back up, but we talked about in our analysis of the wrongful death complaint, that warnings for medications and contraindication is completely different. I made kind of the joke that, like, fish has a warning for pregnant women, right? So they're kind of begging the question here with their wording, like if you don't look into this, because I'm technically a medical layman, I don't know anything deep into the medical world at all. And so I had to figure that out for myself. I was like, well, wait a minute, a warning is just a warning. Contraindication is contraindication. So, like, which means it will kill your baby, right? Like, or it will hurt, like, you cannot take it. Or if you have this certain heart issue, you cannot take this medication because it will kill you. Like, contraindication is much more serious than a warning. Basically everything has a warning. Your seasonal allergy medicine has warnings. Okay, so yeah, and everything has possible severe side effects. You can have crazy side effects from Theraflu, like, you just don't know what can happen, and so it's very disingenuous. And now we know as well, because of what she had just said before. I feel confident in saying it. In my opinion, it's a whole lie that they didn't even keep giving her this medication, and they're trying to lie and say that these medications could have hurt the baby.
Sorry, I'm ranting. We're never going to get through anything else.
Same. Sorry.
Kill me because she worked very hard on our PowerPoint. So she said she needed to go to the bathroom. A nurse removed the IV at 1:40. Remove the IV. That's not even correct either. I'm sure what they did was just help like the IV, so they probably stopped the normal saline drip so that she didn't have to take the IV pole with her to the bathroom. Surely they didn't take it out. Alexee's mother checked on her after 1 minute. That's impressive. So she goes to the bathroom at 1:39, and at 1:40, her mother checks on her. I feel like this is either wrong or her mom, you know, it wouldn't shock me. She is a bit overbearing, it seems. Checked on her again at 1:49. At 1:56, oh, AGH is the name of the hospital. They checked on her, and the nurses got the key to unlock the bathroom door, but before it was unlocked, she left the bathroom. No one assisted her as she walked back out and went back to the room. She gave birth unassisted to a son in the bathroom. At 2:02, doctor had already ordered an ultrasound to determine the status of the baby, and the same was ordered before the doctors and nurses learned she had given birth. They pronounced the baby dead at 2:38 a.m. Hospital allowed police into the room of Alexee with lapel cameras on, asked questions of Alexee and her mother that are protected by HIPAA laws and by the New Mexico Constitution laws. All right, listen. All right. HIPAA has nothing to do with this, okay? Police are not bound by HIPAA. This is the dumbest thing I have ever read. Like, not only from the fact that the medical facts are all off, but if somebody who wasn't medical read this, they'd be like, yeah, I get it. It's so, like, I can see how that would not be okay. But, like, HIPAA is
Right.
Health Information Protection Privacy Act, and it is for people who work in healthcare, not police with body cam footage on.
Good job.
Where are we? Subsequently, the videos without consent of Alexee, her attorneys, and or the court were disclosed to the media. All right, listen, I don't freaking care. Okay, this is a lawsuit against the hospital and the doctors and the nurses and the other medical staff there. So why?
Now, this is a bit insidious. I'm so glad that her attitude is, I don't freaking care. But the one insidious part about this that people need to realize is that those medical records that got released to the public were not on behalf of Artesia General Hospital themselves. Okay, I can say that with full confidence. I have investigated the leak of the records. Artesia General Hospital, as an entity, played no role in leaking Alexee's medical records. They didn't. It's very disingenuous that they say this. All proof leads to, all the evidence we have leads to the fact that the medical records that have been leaked in this case are state's evidence, which means only a small handful of people had access to those before they were disseminated to the public. And it was not the state's attorneys or the detectives. We can say that, right? So with that being said, I can't say exactly who did it, but it's so funny because, yeah, it's like, who cares? But then you got to look deeper because obviously these people, most people who are starting to cover this case or are even into the case don't even really know that these medical records are state's evidence. I've not been proven wrong on that yet. No one can prove me wrong on it yet. People have tried, they have failed, and I know I'm right. And so, you know, I can say that with confidence. And so it's just so funny that she's like, I don't care, like release her stuff to the public, go for it. Because I have the same, you know, feeling about all the body cam footage and the hallway footage, not the medical records, but I do feel that way about everything else because it's like, yeah, let us see what happened. Let us judge it. But when it comes to the medical records, I do not like that anything about those have been leaked or given to the public because, in my personal opinion, there's something very insidious going on behind the scenes with that, and that investigation is ongoing. But I love that she does not care that Alexee was exposed to the public.
So why are we talking about things that you think the police did wrong? Cry me a river. Sue the police. I don't think you'll get far because it's irrelevant. Irrelevant.
Rosa said she would sue the police.
Irrelevant information. The hospital violated HIPAA laws by allowing the taking of such videos and the release of protected health information. The hospital is not in charge of what the police do. Sorry. And also, they're not in charge of that being released to the media.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what private health information they're talking about in that regard. On January 30th, 3 days after the instance, I do know for a fact that the detectives improperly accessed the medical records for Alexee because they only signed a medical release form. They did not get a court order for them. I have it on good authority that those first copy of those medical records were thus thrown out. And then they were obtained properly after the autopsy came back as homicide, and they realized they would be dealing with homicide charges and that this was not a miscarried baby or anything like that. They got the evidence properly. So this this claim, they could be talking about in that instance, but again, that was remedied. Alexee was made aware of it by the email that the medical records leaker also gave us, an email addressed to Alexee, and they want us to believe they're not connected to the Trevizos, but that's okay. In that email, it does mention the January 30th date. I can confirm that, yeah, those medical records were accessed improperly. Doesn't really matter because we got the right kind. We got them with a court order. We did it right. And those are the ones that were leaked to the public. So, not to keep harping on this, but we can continue.
The hospital employees and doctors were aware of the pregnancy at 12:51 and failed to inform Alexee that she was pregnant, failed to take the necessary healthcare precautions and protocols for a pregnant woman who was out of term pregnancy. 1, they didn't know it was a term pregnancy because someone said there's no way they're pregnant. 2, you are not required to immediately run to the room and give information to a patient as soon as something
Boom.
is resulted in your computer system. This is so dumb.
I'm so glad she brought that up. Sorry, I'll start trying to go quicker with all my little explanations here. But we did say in our video, like, I believe there was 3 other people. We don't know the severity of their cases in the ER that night. If you divide the time down, it's like by the time that the doctor had come to see Alexee after knowing about these positive tests and Alexee was in the bathroom, I believe it was about 15 minutes per patient. That is completely reasonable. It's not like a crazy amount of time for the doctor to go. And in that portion of my video, I said who made Alexee the princess of the ER, that she needs to be dealt with first on every matter, first and foremost. Even when we see on the body cam footage that like prisoner guy walking by in immense pain, screaming out in pain. Yeah, so I'm glad that she's saying that like it's not required, because I didn't know if personally, if I'm like, is that something that you're required like to run and tell them? You know, do you have to go tell them? I assume you don't. And so I'm glad that she can confirm that no, the doctor didn't do anything wrong by not telling Alexee, you know, within freaking minutes.
The decedent died from the malpractice of the defendants. Sorry, I need a minute. Guys,
So
this-
ridiculous.
I'm gonna let some air into this very hot room and turn off my heater and sit with that for a second because it pisses me off. Okay, not number 42.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm so mad. I'm like, I just. So again, before I read this and before this happened, oh shoot, sorry. Before I read this, and even yeah, they got ChatGPT to write it. Yeah, yes, before I don't think ChatGPT wouldn't be making spelling mistakes and such silly statements. Honestly, I think ChatGPT could have done better.
Lawyer shade. Lawyer shade.
Okay, so anyway, being aware of the pregnancy at 12:51 a.m. and failing to inform Alexee that she was pregnant prior to her leaving and delivering the baby at I don't know, 39, less than an hour after that. Like, this is an emergency room. This is the Wendy's. Potentially people like actively dying, right? So if you have a pregnancy test in somebody who has said there's no way I'm pregnant, and you have this complex social dynamic going on between the teenager and the parent that's at the bedside, that they've given permission to be at the bedside, you can't really just kick them out without them saying that that's okay. Then, okay, like if there's maybe a trauma in trauma 1, someone had a car accident and they're bleeding out, you're not going to run to the socially complex room to talk about it. They're emergency room doctors. They're treating emergencies. And obviously this is an emergency, but they did not know she was term pregnant because she chose to withhold that information. Oh, it's so stupid. Again, I have a lot of empathy for the things that led up to this point, but thinking that it's appropriate to do this is ridiculous.
Right.
So she was 19 at the time, 5 foot in height, and her weight was 126 pounds. Literally don't care. All the previous paragraphs are incorporated as reference. Defendant hospital breached its duties by. All right, one second. Oh yeah, okay, my kids are home, but that's all right. We'll finish up for a while. It's okay. Okay, so this is how the hospital apparently breached their duties. All right, 1, failure to perform a timely, complete, and accurate assessment of Alexee. I'm sorry, but we cannot work with information that we are not given. Okay, if she had said I am full-term pregnant, then this probably would have gone different. If she really didn't know that, which I don't believe, then even in that case, there's no way that you would say that arriving there and being seen at 12:05 and not knowing about the pregnancy until 1:40 or telling them until then is like malpractice. There was no reason to think that something immediately life-threatening was happening. Part of medicine is just gathering information. This is so stupid. And it just makes me so mad. Failure to follow guidelines and practices that a woman of childbearing age complaining of low back pain and or abdominal pain is presumed pregnant until proven otherwise. Please tell me again how ER doctors should ignore the pain of people who are reproductive age because they might be pregnant. Like, what are we doing? Of course, that's not what you should do. You can give pain medication to people even if they have the ability to become pregnant because they are people in pain who deserve pain relief. This is insanity. I'm so mad. So yeah, someone said this has got to be a dude writing this. Failure to follow guidelines and practices that a woman of childbearing age who indicates she has to go to the bathroom should be examined first to make certain she is not pregnant and giving birth. There you have it. These lawyers think that before you're allowed to poop in a hospital toilet, if you present with, I don't know, possibly like food poisoning or something causing severe abdominal pain, that you should have to have a pelvic exam before you're allowed to poop. That sounds like just incredible advice.
I'm so glad that she's hitting on this here because I have wondered, was there any issue with that? Since I'm not in the medical world at all, I have to try and just go off of what's reasonable and what I can find. And for her to say that, it would have been ridiculous to be like, no, you can't poop, because I believe in my video I said, like, what were they supposed to do? Like, tell her, no, you have to poop right here. Here's a bedpan. Someone has to go into the bathroom with you because you're a woman who could be pregnant, like, or you have a positive pregnancy test, so we have to go in the bathroom with you. That also has lawsuit written like all over it. So I'm just really glad she's hitting on this, because I was wondering the intricacies of bathroom use, because I was under the impression that unless she could possibly like fall and injure herself, like she wasn't given such a high dose of medication that it would make her like woozy or unstable and have like, baby deer legs, or she wasn't exhibiting like signs like with her brain as to where she's unstable as far as falling down and stuff like that, like concussions or aneurysms, tumors, things like that. So it's like she wasn't presenting in a way that she would injure herself in the bathroom, other than possibly because she's upset, like a self-injury, but not because of the medication or her medical how she was presenting. And so I'm glad to get some confirmation on that, because people were adamant, the supporters of Alexee, like kind of gaslight you into thinking that you could be wrong about these things. But no, like no one needed to go in the bathroom with Alexee. No one needed to hold the meat. Like, I'm going to put it this scary ass way. Because they're like, they shouldn't have took her off the IV. They shouldn't have done this, that, the other. So you're going to say that she needed to forcibly have a needle in her arm and be forced to poop in a pan? Let's say she wasn't pregnant, but that's what they decided to do because they had a pregnancy test that was positive. Maybe she was a week pregnant, whatever. Like, you're going to hold it, make someone not be able to take a needle out and poop in a pan. Okay. That also has a lawsuit written all over it. So I'm just glad she can clarify this for us.
I love it when attorneys go to medical school and learn such important things that were left out of my medical training. Actually, I actually applaud this attorney for having so much really beneficial information that I never knew I was malpracticing all the time. I mean, I see people who can get pregnant every day, and never have I once ever, unless they were in active labor, and I knew that because they told me that they were pregnant, never have I once ever said, I'm not gonna let you poop. I have to do a pelvic exam first because you're 21 or 14 or 15 or 35, pelvic exams before pooping. It's the new rule. I'm really just so incredibly thankful for these attorneys, because I could have just medical malpracticed my whole life. They've saved me for that. Okay, moving on, because I obviously can't stop being ridiculous. Sorry, I'm so distracted. Failure to follow guidelines and practices that a woman known by the hospital doctor and caregivers to be pregnant based on a hospital and doctor test should be examined before going to the bathroom, especially after muscle relaxants and morphine have been given via an IV. Make certain she's not giving birth, as opposed to having to relieve themselves. Do we even know that the person who had seen the test result actually was who she said she was going to? I don't know that that was even the same person. Like, who knew about the test result at this point? And also, where is this girl's responsibility in all of this? I'm not going to force people to have an exam before they go poop. Job. This is all so ridiculous. One, how do you know they didn't have an appropriate differential diagnosis? And two, none of those medicines are absolutely contraindicated in pregnancy. Thank you. I am an obstetrician. I am 100% completely certain that at their top of their list of differentials was a possibility of pregnancy, which is particularly why they did a pregnancy test. God, I should never be allowed to read stuff like this. I'm so stressed. I hate it. It makes me so deep. You're right. Nobody in that hospital was trained to diagnose a pregnancy. Are you kidding me? Alexee could have diagnosed a pregnancy. She's even trained for that. It's called the pregnancy test is positive. What the fuck are we even doing? I'm sorry. This is so dumb. I have never read such stupid claims in my life. Turns out, most of the time, if birth is imminent, people will say something like, I think something's coming out. You've all been on YouTube with me when we watched Didn't Know I Was Pregnant, right? They don't typically run to the bathroom and lock themselves in by themselves.
Great point.
They typically say, something's coming out. Oh my God, I think I'm dying. Can you help me? Maybe.
Something just came out of me.
Concealed a pregnancy. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong, because I may be just real stupid at reading these. Are they saying both that they had the information and didn't act on it because they are idiots and the hospital should hire people that are less idiot than the idiots that they employ? And also saying, like, the stupid hospital didn't tell the attending physician what was going on and they should have. Both those things can't be true. The doctors
Great job picking up on that. Like, yes, we noticed that in our video too. You can't have it both ways. You can't say, yeah, you didn't know quick enough, and say you knew and didn't do it. What is it?
The doctors can't be idiots who fail to act in a timely manner on the information they had, while also not being privy to the information because the hospital systems suck. What are we saying? There's a lot of words here, so many words, and none of them make sense when put together. Failure to implement and operate a system in which the existence of pregnancy is immediately provided to the attending physician. That is not necessary. Sorry, it's not healthcare information. The patient shared her information, so I think when a dead baby is in a trash can, that we are allowed to tell the police, hi, we found a dead baby in the trash can, and the police are allowed to come in and ask questions. I don't know. I guess I can see a little bit of this claim like around, I don't know. This is complex because earlier when they were talking about the body cam footage, they were talking about Alexee being filmed and she was answering questions and stuff. But once you have a criminal possibility going on and you've got a dead baby in a trash can, I don't really think that, I don't know. I don't know. I think that the staff is allowed to communicate with police about that.
Yes, this is where it gets in the weeds, and why it's confusing is because it is not clear. Literally, this is what the judge in this case is deciding on right now. Excuse me. As we all know here, the followers of this case, that Gary has argued that there is a medical privilege, that the state is not allowed to have the medical records. There is, issues with the hospital statements in the body cam. Now, the only real issues that come from it, and we can say this with certainty because we've studied the case law and the rules of evidence and everything surrounding these issues. One is if Alexee should or should not have been Mirandized at the point when the police tell her she is in custody. Now, the issue with that is she was not given a custodial interview, and everything she said before being quote unquote in custody, just in the pursuit of police investigation, she made excited utterances and said these things out loud without the police or anyone asking anything. The doctor specifically did not ask Alexee anything about the baby. All the doctor said was, we found a dead baby in the trash, to which Alexee says, nothing was crying, I didn't know what to do, yada, yada, yada. So all that should be allowed in because Alexee didn't need to be Mirandized just by being in police presence and suspected of a crime. Now, anything happening after the police tell Alexee she's not allowed to leave is possibly going to be thrown out. Now, the other issue, the judge could decide that the evidence all the way up into the point of Alexee running into the bathroom, any hospital statements made to staff are covered by privilege because no crime had taken place, and those can be thrown out. The judge could decide that those statements and her actions within the hour and a half or whatever that she had been at the ER were in furtherance of her crime and are not covered by privilege and can be allowed in. With or without those statements, we don't need it because Alexee denied her pregnancy and claimed virginity after having given birth, which I believe all those statements and medical information will not be privileged and will be allowed in. So that is why this is confusing here for pretty much everyone who sees this case. So I'm not blaming her. That was one of the main reasons that got me to start covering this case, was because I knew I could explain, because everyone was confused as to where HIPAA ends and the police investigation begins. So at this point, we pretty much know that the hallway video from the hospital is coming in. The judge already implied that she leans towards letting that in. So I believe everything after that, and then up until the point of Alexee being put in custody without Miranda, is going to be thrown out. Not that I do think she needed to be Mirandized because no one questioned her, but just to err on the safe side, which we still have a bunch of great footage in that. But anyways, that's why this part's confusing. We can continue.
That I don't know, but regardless, this is all ridiculous. If HIPAA actually does prevent you from talking to the police in a case where there's a dead baby in a trash can, then I am in favor of changing HIPAA laws to not be like that. But I don't know if that's the case or not. Failure to implement and operate a system that prevents the release of HIP protected information outside the hospital and those directly providing care to the patient. I mean, the hospital and the doctors, they didn't do that. They didn't release any information to anybody. The doctors didn't talk to the media. They weren't interviewed by the media. They spoke to the police about a suspicious death of a baby in a trash can and the events leading up to that. And the police released the body cam footage. I don't know. This is so silly. By other means, it will be ascertained through discovery during this litigation. Oh yeah, and also everything else that they did wrong. You know, all the other things that all these idiots did. Treatment, care, and management of Alexee in the hospital were wanton, reckless, and performed with utter disregard for the safety and welfare of Alexee Trevizo. The death was direct and proximate result of the negligent acts and omissions of defendant hospital, doctor, and healthcare providers of the defendant hospital. I'm sorry, what? Maybe if she had said, "Oh my gosh, help, I delivered a baby," they could have helped. It's like, what the heck? I just don't understand how they could pretend that nothing that happened in the 20 minutes she was in that bathroom has any bearing on the outcome, or anything that happened in the 35 weeks before she walked into that health emergency room and the way that she was raised and all of that. Like, this is insane. All right, so the defendant hospital knew or should have known that hiring and or credentialing the doctors, nurses, and staff who cared for Alexee would create an unreasonable risk of injury to a group or class that includes the decedent. Defendant hospital failed to use ordinary care in hiring and or credentialing the doctors, nurses, and staff who cared for Alexee. What an offensive, horrible, insane allegation to make. It makes me so mad. I am so mad. I am so freaking mad. After they've had to go through this, okay, this is a traumatic experience for everybody involved, not the least of which is Alexee herself, because again, I do have some empathy, you know, in a little box, which is now, you know, covered in layers of anger for what led her to do this. I don't think that absolves her of responsibility for whatever happened in that bathroom and before, but to then like traumatize everybody around you and also then just drag them through this is insanity. Her mother should be in jail. Okay. So they hired shitty doctors. They don't understand how to treat pregnancy. They don't know how to deliver a baby. I mean, I don't really know how to deliver a baby. I didn't know was in there either. Nobody taught me that, because usually that's something that people tell us. And if they don't know, it's usually something they tell us immediately after the baby came out. Inappropriately trained healthcare providers. They don't know what pregnancy is. They don't know how to define or recognize pregnancy. They have bad procedures. They don't have any guidelines. This attorney doesn't know what HIPAA is, choosing not to establish and enforce adequate written procedures. Okay, blah, 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 blah. I can't read any more of this. So, all right, let's read that. This is interesting to me because we know definitively that I am properly trained to take care of pregnant patients, right? So this says, if they had been properly trained and supervised, then they would not have, among other things, negligently failed to provide adequate nursing interventions to prevent the death of Alexee Trevizo. I don't agree with that. Negligently failed to provide adequate nursing interventions to, did that just say the same thing twice? Does this say the same thing twice? This is so bad. Like, did this attorney just like have a few beers and write this in 3 hours one night and never have, you know, anybody else on his team go through it? What the hell? This is insane. How about you are a negligent attorney and whoever you work for failed to make sure that you were appropriately trained in, you know, spelling, grammar, and the writing of legislative lawsuits or whatever this is. Negligently failed to provide adequate medical services to prevent medication, over medication, contraindicated medication for pregnant female. We're still going to talk about that in just a second. Timely testing, more stupid things, more things they don't understand, more wildly irresponsible accusations, more silly talk about hiring because, you know, we should trust the judgment of the attorney that wrote this incredible piece of literature. Okay, yeah, that's enough. I can't do it anymore. I can't do it anymore. Okay,
or their paralegal.
And I just can't temperature regulate out here. I will talk about the discussion of the medications. Okay, so in the process of labor, all of those medications that they listed, so sodium chloride for sure did not cause a problem. Ondansetron or Zofran absolutely did not cause a problem with baby. Toradol, a single dose soon right before delivery, is not going to cause the death of a baby. Morphine, cyclobenzaprine also is not going to cause death of the baby. We use that regularly in patients who are pregnant. The morphine we can talk about. So morphine is an opiate medication, and we do use it in pregnancy, particularly if someone's having severe pain and they're not close to delivery. You don't really want to intentionally give it right before delivery because it can cause neonatal respiratory depression. However, that is a very treatable thing that can happen. So most of you probably have heard of naloxone, which is an opiate reversal, right? And you've probably heard of it in relationship to discussing like fentanyl overdose. But naloxone can also be given if somebody receives an IV opiate medication like fentanyl or morphine and then rapidly delivers soon after, and the baby is having respiratory depression, meaning it's not breathing as well as it should be. It causes respiratory depression in adults too, but that's how like opiate death can happen. But it's a smaller dose in a baby, obviously. So if that was the cause of death, and again, I don't know what the cause of death here is. I don't know if this was a stillbirth. I do not know if this was an intentional killing of that baby. I don't know what happened in the bathroom, and I'm going to give you a couple of my theories. But if what happened was the baby was alive but not having a respiratory effort, then if she had asked for help, easily available in that trauma unit, they're in an emergency room, would have been naloxone. And if respiratory depression had been there because the morphine was given close to the time of delivery, they would have given the baby naloxone if they had known that the baby was born. So the negligence was not on the staff for treating the person who was pregnant for their pain. That is something that I think ethically you should do. The negligence here would be on the person who delivered a baby. And let's imagine that the scenario was the only problem was that he was respiratory depressed from the opiate medication. They could have fixed that and they could have kept him from dying. They couldn't do that because she was negligent and did not alert the hospital staff as to what happened. So out of
Boom, 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 boom. I did not know about naloxone. I've not brought that up. I've never seen or heard about it. I have heard about what is that other one called? Where if you suspect someone has an overdose, you put it in their nose. I know Narcan. I know about Narcan, so it seems like this must be something similar. Naloxone, whatever. This is so great for this case because obviously a medical expert can testify to this fact that everyone has said that if Alexee pulled the help cord or if she had asked for help in any way, shape, or form, that the baby could have been saved. HT even said in his interview that, there was a baby around the time of when Alexee was there and they saved the baby. I think it was either right before or right after Alexee, but the baby's alive and well, he was saying, after, it being in dire condition. So they obviously have the means and ability to resuscitate and save a baby if the baby was not beyond saving. So we're getting really close to the end of this. This is where a lot of very, very solid medical information is. So please bear with me in this last few minutes because we have, I think, some very good medical information to solidify exactly what went down in that bathroom.
Out of all of these things that they talk about, morphine is the only one that I could even see playing a role at all in the outcome here. And it only played a role because she was not forthcoming with information and she did not ask for help once that happened. My theory on this is actually not that the morphine caused the problem, because it had been probably an hour since she got the morphine, judging by the timeline, although they could have given her a second dose. And I suspect
They
because
did
she was a
not.
relatively small person who doesn't have a history of needing extra opiates to control their pain, I would guess that they had not given like a hefty dose of morphine. And the chances of that causing respiratory depression in the neonate that was born an hour later is, I think, fairly low. Not impossible, just a theory, My theory, based on listening to them describe what the room looked like and what the umbilical cord looked like, is that Alexee, whether she knew she was pregnant or not, I suspect that she did and was intentionally concealing it, but I don't know because people can be pregnant and not know. But whether she was or not, I suspect that she went in that bathroom, delivered the baby, whether she was standing or sitting, I don't know, and that the umbilical cord broke, either because she was standing and it fell to the floor, or because she was sitting and it was a short cord and it snapped at the time of delivery. That can happen. It doesn't happen often, but it absolutely can happen. If that happens, then blood goes everywhere. If you avulse an umbilical cord, meaning rip it either in half or off at the belly button, then the blood goes everywhere from the umbilical cord side and from the baby side. And when that happens, babies rapidly bleed to death because they don't have a very big blood volume. That umbilical cord was separated regardless of how it happened. I don't think that she could have just, I don't think there's any way that.
Okay, let's just take note here very quick because I don't want to post the photo of the bathroom. You are more than able to go and look and find it. I just I don't want to have jump scares and bloody gross things for people to look at. Now, if what she is saying is correct, and I feel like I have seen that stereotyped in movies or things like that where like blood is spurting out all crazy, that is not at all how the bathroom looked, actually. So I'm not discounting anything that she's saying here. I'm actually very grateful that she is giving us this information about how forceful and like spurting the blood would come out when it comes to the umbilical cord. Personally, this makes me think that I do believe the umbilical cord was attached to baby Alex still. And we'll get into that later because she talks about blood loss from the baby being a possible cause of death and that the autopsy doesn't mention blood loss. Now, I believe that is possible that the blood loss was not a factor if the umbilical cord remained attached to baby Alex. This also leads to a secondary part of the theory that we could discuss, but I do believe, by all accounts, that the umbilical cord was not free in the bag. I believe the umbilical cord was still attached to baby Alex. This leads me to believe that she broke it off from the placenta, or it broke off from the placenta itself, and that's where the blood came from. In my opinion, even though she cleaned it up, it is not a ridiculous amount of blood. It looks like she, because there was blood on the toilet, gave birth on or near the toilet, and when the placenta detached from the umbilical cord, sorry, I'm trying to get my words very straight here. When the placenta detached from the umbilical cord, that is what caused the vast majority of the blood on the ground. I do not know if the placenta was delivered naturally or if she also forced out the placenta. It could explain the copious amounts of bleeding, because when the placenta detached from her uterus, if it had gone naturally, from the research I found, the blood vessels would have closed up that attach them. And maybe if she did manually remove that placenta improperly by pulling it out in a rush, it would cause that bleeding that they were seeing afterwards when they weren't able to, get the ultrasounds going. But I find it interesting when she's talking about this umbilical cord and the blood spurting everywhere, because it wasn't, it was not that bloody, in my opinion. I know that sounds crazy, but as someone who has seen various crime scene photos and like a very serious amount of blood in some of the stuff I've seen, this is not a crazy amount of blood. Again, it is a baby, but I don't think it was the blood volume of a baby that she was even able to clean up. So I don't believe there was a lot of blood volume lost in that bathroom as far as the baby. I think it was all from the placenta, and I think the placenta was being ripped apart and blood was getting on the ground from the placenta and possibly leaked originally. But I believe a lot of blood got into the bag because of the umbilical cord. Anyways, sorry, let's keep going.
Any way that she could have just snapped it, that would be very weird. I mean, there's certainly sometimes umbilical cords that are really thin and maybe you could do that, but it is fairly hard to get an umbilical cord to break. So I don't know, what the story there is, but the way they described it was that it wasn't clamped with anything or tied with anything. And if that baby was alive, even if it wasn't crying, and that umbilical cord snapped either because she did it or it happened on its own, the baby would have rapidly bled out. Even in that situation, I don't know if she immediately got help, if they would have been able to intervene and save the baby. This is a very rapid process. Certainly, there was more chance, if that was what was going on, for them to intervene and save him if she said something. But I don't know necessarily if they would have been able to, because it happens very quickly. And so the other obvious thing that most people thought when they heard this is that she suffocated him. And that's certainly possible too. Or there is also the possibility that she actually thought he was stillborn and that he was put into the trash bag and suffocated there. So I would be interested to see information about the placenta, so someone said the autopsy showed the baby was born alive and died from being put in the trash bag. I'm not sure autopsies say things like that. Adrenal hemorrhage is an interesting finding. Yeah, so it doesn't say the baby died of entrapment. I will look and see if it says anything about that, but I don't know why this is blurry, but it says that the baby was found entrapped in a plastic bag. No decomposition or maceration, which means that this death happened either in the process of labor, immediately before, or immediately after. No congenital anomalies, patent foramen ovale and ductus arteriosus. Okay, this is important too, because that means that the baby had not taken breaths significantly enough to alter the way that the blood was flowing through. This is really blurry. I'm trying to read through it even though it's blurry, but the patent foramen ovale and ductus arteriosus is something I've talked about in a video where I talked about the physiology of how blood flows in a fetus. And it's basically a hole in two parts of the heart, and it allows blood to flow a bit differently because you're not breathing in to oxygenate the lungs when you're a fetus. Once you're born and take a big breath, the change in pressure that happens in the lungs causes those to close. The foramen ovale usually fairly quickly. Ductus arteriosus maybe takes a little bit more time. But usually if babies have taken a good few breaths, that foramen ovale should be closed or closing. And so that would make me think that there wasn't a lot of breathing going on prior to the baby dying. Now, that's not one for one. It's just something to note. So they tell the story. No resuscitation was attempted. They said that in the deposition. They said that in the autopsy report. So they're going to have a hard time really saying that CPR was, I have no idea why there are balloons by me. They're going to have a really, what is that? Why is it doing that? They're going to have a really hard time saying that CPR from medical staff caused the aeration in the lungs and stomach. Now, her defense could be that she tried to resuscitate the baby, but
And that
it is thought that the placenta may have been flushed down the toilet. So they don't have a placenta? How could you flush a whole placenta down the toilet? Autopsy and postmortem CT
it's
showed
possible.
no anatomic abnormalities or physical injuries. The lungs were aerated and there was air in the stomach and no changes of decomposition. Connections in the heart that allow proper blood flow in utero were still open, which is not unusual. The adrenal glands showed microscopic hemorrhage, which can be seen in hypoxia, lack of air. So that's problematic for trying to prove that the baby died from something else. A placenta is
Right.
quite, I mean, a full-term placenta, that would even be a fairly small one. I cannot imagine how a full-term placenta could get flushed down the toilet. That's like, that makes no sense to me. Let's see. Viral testing showed no viruses, no infections, maybe some contaminant. Electrolyte testing was normal. Metabolic strain was normal. Chromosomes were attempted, but inadequate for interpretation. That's weird. Postmortem toxicology showed phentermine, a derivative of amphetamine that is often used as an appetite suppressant. Interesting. She was taking fen. That is something that I did not catch in any of the other information on this. So phentermine is a prescription-only appetite suppressant diet pill. And there's not really any other medical use, to my knowledge, of why that would be prescribed to a 19-year-old who is seemingly normal in size.
Bingo.
Yeah, so someone said, could this be something provided by the mother? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I guess so, especially if, I don't know, guys, it's beyond me. This whole thing is weird. And it did
Street
show morphine also.
fentanyl.
So there was enough time for morphine to cross the placenta, which is not surprising. That happens almost immediately. But they don't discuss the level in which that was at. Neuropathology exam showed a normal for age brain with no pathological findings. Non-specific vascular congestion, which can be seen in hypoxia, among other things, air in the lungs and stomach, and no evidence of decomposition is consistent with the baby having been born alive. Based on length, weight, and organ size, I don't know what they've redacted here, but basically says term and compatible with life outside the uterus. Entrapment occurs when an individual is in an airtight or relatively airtight container, in this case, a tied plastic trash bag, and consumes all of the available oxygen until there's no longer enough to sustain life. Given the investigative information, exam findings, cause of manner of death are best certified as, this may be where they go in to say that it was potentially entrapment, which is what someone was saying in the chat earlier, but seems like. Okay, so I don't know. I don't know that, I'm not a pathologist, but, and that may not, it's obviously not the full complete report, but I find it really odd that they didn't talk about the umbilical cord, because there is still an umbilical cord. If they don't have the placenta, which is weird, or maybe the placenta went with her, like, because my understanding is they said that she hadn't delivered the placenta, and that's why they were transferring to another hospital. But regardless, if that's the case, like if she went to another hospital with the placenta still in her, this is a very bad autopsy report. Like,
No, but I don't know if anyone will correct her on this in a minute, but no, the placenta was never found. We don't have the medical records from Loveless, which was the hospital that she was transferred to, but we do know, because of statements made by the detectives, that the placenta was never found, not located inside Alexee, not located anywhere. They thought that maybe the hospital cleaner could have thrown it away. I find that to be absolutely ridiculous. I think that it would have been big, like, unless it was ripped up in a bunch of small pieces. And the hospital, the cleaner, Lila, she did not mention anything like that. She didn't say there was like a huge chunk of anything. She didn't mention like a fleshy ball on the ground, like, or a fleshy disc on the ground or anything like that. It was bloody, right? It wasn't chunky. Sorry to be gross with it, but it is what it is. I just find it unrealistic that literally, like, it literally is like a deflated ball. Like, you see a deflated ball size mass of veins. Like, and if you've never seen a placenta, go look up what the placenta actually looks like. You're going to tell me that the cleaner didn't realize that and threw it away. That's ridiculous. It would have been found. No, that's not what happened. Alexee tore it apart and flushed it. It's possible. I looked up, the weights and the flushing power of toilets, and I can honestly say that thing was flushed. She flushed it, which just shows more intent in concealing a crime, in my opinion, but can continue, because I don't think it is a bad autopsy. I think the issue that people are going to have with this autopsy is it isn't an under the knife autopsy. They didn't do a float test on these lungs. This is a MRI CT scan autopsy. This is not your typical autopsy. Why? It appears that there is a very religious portion of New Mexico, and they don't agree to autopsies on their family members or themselves post-mortem like they these people, there seems to be an issue with it. And this has bridged the gap for that highly religious community to be okay with an autopsy because you don't feel like they're desecrating and cutting up a body postmortem. Okay. That's why it might seem like a bit different of an autopsy. It might not have the same things listed as you normally see, but New Mexico is one of very, very, very few places that do this. So that's why it is a bit different of an autopsy, but it does not discount the fact. I also think that, let's say the umbilical cord was on the baby, if there's enough blood left in the umbilical cord, and most of the blood that came out was from the original snapping and the placenta being on the ground and Alexee bleeding out everywhere, then baby Alex could have definitely had enough blood to sustain him while he sat there and suffocated to death. This also could possibly indicate that Alexee did maybe suffocate the baby herself, because if there is still a significant amount of blood inside baby Alex that didn't escape, that would mean that the heart stopped pumping the blood and it didn't have anywhere to go and it wasn't being pushed out of that umbilical cord, right? So I've very much stayed away from that thought. I guess I can't just like even wrap my mind around that thought. My fiance has thought since he first heard even the surrounding circumstantial evidence of this case, he assumed that she suffocated the baby because he said, well, wouldn't you worry about the baby crying, yada, yada, yada. So actually, this doctor has me thinking in a different way now, and thinking in the sense of, wow, maybe the bag isn't what did it. Maybe Alexee actually did it. And that's just my opinion. But if the blood is an issue and we know we have all these other indications that the baby breathed and issues happen, then who's to say that suffocation isn't a possibility?
That is concerning to me that wasn't noted, and that they said like, oh, well, we heard that it was flushed on the toilet, which is weird. I just don't think that there's any way that would happen. I'm still trying to work through my feelings and thoughts on this. Okay, and then they don't comment on the state of the umbilical cord at the belly button. Just like, you can't just snap an umbilical cord and a baby not bleed out. That's just not how it works. Like, I would like to see like what was the vascular status of the baby, like what was the blood volume in him, because it just doesn't make sense to me. You can't break an umbilical cord that quick after birth. Like, if you leave it attached long enough, then it will happen that it clots off on its own and it's fine. But you can't immediately after birth have an umbilical cord snap or be cut without being tied off or clamped and not have a baby bleed out. It's just like, that's what happens physiologically. That is what happens. And I'm in my head, I'm questioning the validity and how much I trust an autopsy report. I'm hoping that there's just a lot more of it that I didn't get to see that does not make a comment on the fact that the umbilical cord was broken and like talk about blood volume and stuff like that at the time of the autopsy. It's very, very weird. I'm not real happy. If this was the autopsy report I was given as an obstetrician, even in a case where I wasn't worried about whatever they're worried about here, I would be a bit frustrated, and I would be calling the pathologist to say like, hey, can you clarify what happened with the cord and how much blood was like in the heart when you did the autopsy? Yeah, bleeding out makes the most sense to me too. Now, I just can't imagine how there would be time for the baby to suffocate if it had no umbilical cord attached. Just unless the umbilical cord was still attached when the suffocation happened, that'd be the only way. And then it was broken after that, because then you wouldn't have that as a problem. But the way they describe the blood splatter and the umbilical cord, something's not adding up to me. I will be very, very.
See, and that is where it made me think, oh crap, maybe Alexee did actually suffocate baby Alex, because if all the blood, I believe, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong, but I do not think that the umbilical cord was detached from baby Alex. The umbilical cord, as far as I'm aware, was attached to baby Alex, unless Alexee put the umbilical cord in the bag with baby Alex. Otherwise, all the witness statements that have talked about the umbilical cord say, sorry for this description, it looked like string cheese, it looked like a rat had attacked it or whatever, right? So it looks like she at least 100% tried to detach it from one area, which means it was attached to the placenta for a minute or so, unless she didn't rip it off. If all those you'd think it would have broken and just like snapped in half if it was a natural break of the umbilical cord. The fact that it was like frayed, for lack of a better term, let's just describe it as frayed, makes me think that there was effort in getting it, like pulling it apart or ripping it apart. With that being said, that's more than enough time. I mean, the baby's still getting blood at that time. The baby's fine, whatever. If there's any kind of respiratory any kind of respiratory issues as far as from the morphine goes, maybe the baby isn't breathing deep and heavy, but I still believe the baby breathed because, like they said, you have other signs other than just the air that suffocation happened. Now, if the umbilical cord was attached to baby Alex, is that enough time for baby Alex to suffocate in the bag? And or do all the other signs of suffocation then mean that Alexee actually physically suffocated the baby? The reason we have to discuss this is because that really changes things, right? The autopsy says that it was entrapment in the bag. Now, that could have been because they don't have any other indication as to where this suffocation came from. You would assume it's from the bag. Well, if there's an issue with the if the science says that since the baby didn't have their umbilical cord clamped off and whatever goes on their belly button, the baby would die from that quicker than they would die from being suffocated, we might have an issue, but we still have a homicide. It's just the way the entrapment happened is different. Now, like I've said, my fiance is convinced that that is what happened. He says that you'd worry about the baby crying. You'd worry about, it making noise and how you don't know how long it would take for it to suffocate in the bag, right? And so like this is a very hard discussion. And when he first said it to me, I wasn't even aware that that was his thought process when I first started covering this and everything. He was 100% under the mindset that, oh, so she suffocated him and then threw him away. I always thought that she was just panicking and didn't even take the time to suffocate the baby and just put him in the trash bag, and then the trash bag suffocated the baby. But maybe if more can come out from this autopsy, maybe this doctor can get more of like the toxicology or a full autopsy report and can maybe figure out about this issue, because now it makes me think, did Alexee actually suffocate the baby physically? I've had some discussions in the comments with you guys, and I believe one of you specifically, I told you about my fiance thinking that the baby was suffocated because I was like, it blew my mind. I couldn't even wrap my head around that. I can't believe I was so fixated on my one potential theory and point of view was that the bag did it and this is what happened, that I literally never even considered the viciousness of suffocating a newborn baby. But if we refer back to Dr. Chris Featherstone's video about neonaticide, he actually says that they suffocate the baby, and he didn't say by putting it in a bag. I would assume most people use whatever means necessary they have, which would also possibly even just be suffocation and holding your hand over the baby or whatever. I don't know. Very hard for me to think about. But because I can say it's more than likely that the umbilical cord was attached to baby Alex unless Alexee took the time to detach it from the placenta, which we know happened, and detaching it from baby Alex and then throwing it away with baby Alex. That doesn't make sense. Why would you take the extra time to pull the placenta, the umbilical cord off of baby Alex? I believe the umbilical cord was on baby Alex. Does that mean then that baby Alex had to have been suffocated almost immediately? Or does that mean that the bag still could have suffocated baby Alex if enough blood was left in the umbilical cord for him to sustain for whatever period of time until losing oxygen in the bag and or bleeding out? So with that being said, this was, I'm sorry for how long this was. I'll try and go back through and cut all this out. As of right now, I've recorded an hour and 40 minutes almost of this. And so I'm going to go through, cut a bunch of this out. But so if anything is weird or jumpy or anything like that, it's because I'm cutting out parts that didn't really play anything or anything. I'm cutting out parts that didn't really matter or anything like that. But this was a phenomenal video. I'm so glad a medical professional has spoken up, specifically one who handles babies all the time, because we already had, Dr. Chris Featherston's video talking about neonaticide and like forensic, psychology. But now we actually have an obstetrician saying, hey, here is the facts about, childbirth and disregarding, and throwing a bunch of shade on the civil lawsuit, because that's always nice to see. It is a ridiculous lawsuit, in my opinion, and it will go nowhere. But please let me know your thoughts down below in regards to the issue with the umbilical cord. If you believe that the umbilical cord is 100% definitely attached to baby Alex or not. So let me know your thoughts down below on the umbilical cord issue here. If what she's saying is true as far as the baby bleeding out, does this indicate that the baby was a stillborn and no blood was going everywhere? Does that incidentally prove for us then that the baby was alive? Because if if blood was being pumped everywhere, that means the baby's heart was going once the umbilical cord was severed. And if the umbilical cord, if you're any medical professionals out there, I know I have a couple people who comment and clarify some stuff for me when I have medical questions, and it's greatly appreciated. If the umbilical cord is indeed attached to baby Alex, would he be able to suffocate, or would he still bleed out before suffocation was possible? If anyone has an answer on that, I would be greatly appreciative, because it does add a little puzzle piece that we need to make sure we have down, obviously, before we get to trial. So with all that being said, thank you so much for making it this far in this video. If you have any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them down below and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And I do genuinely enjoy the conversation. If you are interested in following this case all the way to trial, please subscribe, as I will be covering it all along the way with a legal focus. It's your girl Friday. I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye.